What's up everybody, Rob here. So real quick video today, what I'm going to be doing is giving my analysis of the military strategies that were employed in the last season of Game of Thrones. Yes, I'm kind of late to the party, but my job is really boring. And because it's really boring, I have a lot of time to think, and this sort of thing just popped into my head, and I figured I'd just share my thoughts with all of you guys. Now, I'm not going to be sharing the military strategies of the main characters. Specifically, I'll be talking about the last season, particularly the Battle of Winterfell, and why I think it was a bad idea, but I'm not going to be describing it from the perspective of the heroes or the protagonists. I'm going to be looking at it from the perspective of the Night King. And in my opinion, the Night King screwed up. So, yes, now just want to get the point across here. A couple things. First off, I did not actually see the last season of HBO's Game of Thrones. I didn't do it. I got rid of TV and I just stopped caring. Pretty much ever since basically the good writing on the show died with Tywin Lannister anyway. The Dornish plotline was all over the place, and I just stopped. But I have seen reviews of it, and I've seen descriptions of it, and especially long, detailed reviews about what happened. So, I have a pretty good sense of what's going on here. There's been plenty of time spent analyzing what the defenders were doing, like the Dothraki suicide charge right down the middle. I mean, like light cavalry in pitch black darkness, just charging at something. You don't even know what's out there. You don't even know if there is anything out there, but let's charge them out there anyway. Putting your artillery pieces on the front lines. There's no ditches or moats anywhere. Just a whole bunch of it. The whole thing was a disaster from beginning to end. And, I'm not going to be analyzing that. More than enough has been spoken about that sort of thing. So instead, what I'm going to be doing is giving my perspective on the Night King and his invasion of, the land south of the Wall, and the Battle of Winterfell, and just generally his overall strategy, and why I think it was ultimately a bad idea for him. So without any further ado, here is the Night King and why he screwed up. Okay, so the wall is breached in an earlier season, and the good guys decide to make their stand at Winterfell. Now, the Night King attacks them there and tries to overwhelm their defenses, and ultimately, I think this is their poor strategy. Given the composition of the Night King's army, it makes absolutely no sense for him to do this. The bulk of the Night King's army is made up of wights, which are very tough, very durable, basically zombies. They're zombies, except if you take off their head, the rest of the body's still going to come after you. You chop a hand off, the hand is still going to try to come after you. And they're really the only way to destroy them is either through obsidian, which is known as dragon glass. Although in the books, I just want to point out, and I know you're not supposed to compare the books to the show because there's different canon there, but that has absolutely no effect. But in the show, dragon glass does work against them, and setting them on fire does work against them as well. And so basically you just kind of have to either hack them apart into little tiny pieces with regular steel, but again, you have to chop them to really tiny pieces to finally kill them, or you have to either set them on fire, or you have to, in the case of the TV show, hit them with dragon glass. Now, the Whites are under the control of the White Walkers, or as they're known in the books, the Others, and they seem to basically be the officers towards the basic poor infantrymen of the White. Now, that's all well and good, but even still, with the direct control of the White Walkers, the Whites themselves don't really seem to have that much in terms of strategy. They basically swarm over their opponents, and their main advantage comes from their numerical superiority and their durability. Basically, the Night King it's been established that he can resurrect the dead, and he doesn't even have to do anything. He just basically needs, if you just get the Battle of, Hardhome? Hardhome. Yes, Battle of Hardhome. He just basically stands in the middle of a pile of bodies, lifts his arm up, and boom, all the dead from that area just rise up and are ready to replenish their ranks. So their main strength of the Night King's army is its size. They can simply, just overwhelm any opponent. And it was established beforehand, if I recall correctly. I'm doing this from memory here, but if I recall correctly, the army that was sent out to go after Winterfell was about 250,000 strong. So that is a massive number by medieval standards, and we're just going to assume we're going to have to compare it to the Middle Ages as much as possible. Yes, I know it's fictional, but, whatever. 250,000 is a massive number. That is I don't think there even are armies of that size during that particular era in our history. So this is a massive force, and they just seem to swarm right over their opponents. That's their big advantage. And this particular type of army, with the swarm attacks and the massive numerical superiority, lends itself to open field battles where they're basically just able to swarm over their opponents, and because they outnumber their opponents, they can flank around, they can basically surround their enemies, and then just whittle away at them, Basically think like the Battle of Cannae, but with massive numbers instead of clever stratagems, just by sheer volume of bodies you keep throwing at. This particular type of army is least effective against fixed defenses. They would be slowed down by any sort of defenses, such as walls and moats. And yes, I know that there's no moat around Winterfell, as you can see right here. There's no moat at all, or ditch, or anything like that, because reasons. But when they basically, if should there be moats in place, and of course up against the walls, the enemies, the whites, are going to be bunched up. They're going to be all compact together, and that way you can have dragonglass arrows rain down on them at basically point blank range, and you're pretty much guaranteed to hit something. So as they're trying to swarm over the defenses, that's basically a perfect time to just light them up with whatever type of ranged equipment you have, catapults or whatever other type of siege equipment you have, artillery piece like that. You can drop flaming, brands on them, like burning logs, and just like dragonglass arrows, and just basically a whole host of other type of equipment. Also, if the fortifications are set up in a proper way, you can funnel them into choke points and nullify their massive numerical superiority, in which case the actual combat ability of a regular human would be much more advantageous. See, again, even under the control of the White Walkers, Whites basically have, attack. That's all they do. They see a target and they just go straight after it. It's very difficult for them to have complex stratagems and feints and all that sort of stuff. And that way, the discipline and combat abilities of a regular human could, come to the fore right at that point. So basically force them or trick them into, funnel them into a nice little choke point there, and just nullify their numbers. Now, eventually, they will be able to swarm over the walls. That is what you saw in the show. That's pretty much what happened. But if a castle is set up properly, there are multiple layers of defense. So they overrun one set of defenses, struggle and strain and take heavy casualties going over the first set of defenses. You simply go back to the next set of defenses and just keep falling back that way. And it's much more advantageous to fight them in this regard than in an open field battle where, it's basically very difficult to be flanked in a situation like this. So the question would be, why would the Night King attack Winterfell directly, given that that is the least advantageous type of battle for him to be fighting? And really, there's no reason for him to be attacking Winterfell directly, at least not in my opinion. Now, normally a fortification must be attacked in typical, say, medieval or pre-industrial times, even in modern times. A fortification, or basically an enemy strong point like that, has to be attacked, because having hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers in one of your rear areas is, just say, inadvisable to say the least. They could cut off supply lines, they could break apart your lines of communication, and basically having an enemy force behind you when there's also potential enemy force in front of you, you now get sandwiched in between them, and that is, well, you're about to have a bad day. So in the real world, or in a show against conventional opponents, having a force left in your rear areas is a bad idea, mostly for supply issues and lines of communication. Now, this doesn't exist within the Night King's army, though. The Whites and the White Walkers don't have to eat. There is no supply. Well, the Whites don't have to eat. Do White Walkers eat? It's never really established if they eat or not. I don't think they do, and if they do, there's like 12 of them. I'm sure they can manage. The point is, there is no supply lines. There is no line of communication. They don't need to worry about being cut off because there's nothing for them to be cut off from. There is no reinforcements coming up from the north, and that actually brings me up to the next point. They can actually replenish themselves along the way. Every time there is a death of a regular human, the ranks of the dead, the ranks of the Night King army, just swell with that. That's like every human death is another recruit added to the Night King's army. Now, Westeros is a relatively big place. The entire continent, in interviews, George Martin said that the entire continent is roughly the size of South America. And there's been various estimates as to the total population, but it's anywhere between like 50 and 75 million people in all of Westeros. And as far as I know, there is no upper limit to the amount of bodies that can be resurrected by the Night King. There's no cap on that. If there is, it was never established. Any case, it was already established that there were, hundreds of thousands. I think there's like 250,000 in the army going against Winterfell. And those were almost exclusively made up of wildlings and men of the Night's Watch, guys that were basically operating north of the Wall. And that is a very sparsely populated area, and they still managed to get, this many hundreds of thousands sized host added to him. Once he gets into the south, that is just, and by south I mean south of the Wall, that is just fertile grounds for him to just, the Night King to just resurrect and just add to his ranks basically exponentially. And he can keep just building the size of his army, Instead of a couple 100,000, he can have literally, potentially, millions upon millions of recruits, basically, for lack of a better term, added to his host. And that brings me to the crux of what I'm trying to say here. Well, why didn't he just do that? Just skip Winterfell altogether and just keep adding to the ranks of his army.
Okay, so here you have a map of Westeros. You got the north up here, and you have, the rest of it down here. You got Essos over here. And I know they can't cross over open water, but it would be kind of fun to watch. Can you imagine, like, Meereen overrun with White Walkers? I mean, that would be kind of fun to watch. Let's be honest. But in any case, I'm going to lay out what I would have done as the Night King. So they breached the wall, and what they did here is they went basically down the King's Road like a conventional army, and they struck at the defenses at Winterfell, and basically it happened exactly what happened in the show, Deus Ex Arya. Well, what I would have done is I would have ignored Winterfell, and I would have gone after all of this. All these sparsely populated defenses. And by sparsely populated, I mean... sparsely populated in terms of all of Westeros. Yeah, I mean, compare that to, this. But it's still, we're talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people in isolated, very lightly defended areas. The entire defenses of the north basically focus around Moat Cailin and the Neck. Basically, you have Moat Cailin here, and you have the Reeds in... and the Crannogmen there, and any army that's trying to go up north this way is just going to get stuck in the swamps there. They're going to either have to go through Moat Cailin, and that could pretty much stop an army right there, more or less indefinitely, or they're going to have to go around to the swamplands, get bogged down there, and then the Crannogmen, especially the Reeds, are just going to rip them apart with guerrilla warfare and poison darts and all that stuff. And that's basically the main defenses of the north. The rest of it is not really super heavily defended. A lot of these are not very super heavily defended, and they're basically extremely vulnerable. And yes, you do have fixed defenses. You have Winterfell, of course, Castle Cerwyn, the Dread Fort, Deepwood, all these places. Yes, that is true. But you have like all these, you have tons of small villages. You have tons of small isolated communities with, barely a palisade or anything like that. Like we're not talking heavy, thick stone walls here. And that's just adding to your army. So instead of going after Winterfell and these fixed defenses, go after all of this. Just add to your numbers, add to your strength, and just ignore Winterfell. And then just go straight down. And then, you can pass over the Neck, no problem. Again, what the Reeds and the other Crannogmen are going to be able to do there is going to be, at best, limited. Because, they're not going to get bogged down in the swamp because the White Walkers take winter with them. They basically, things get super cold, so everything's going to freeze, so they're not going to get bogged down in the swamp. There's no morale because, one of the big things is morale, having your army, trudging through mud and swampland. That's going to, everyone's going to desert, or they're going to, basically nobody wants to be there, and that's going to slow you down. That's not going to be a problem because there's no morale anyway. And then, poison's not, the poison darts that they use isn't really going to do much anyway. So, yeah, you can just bypass all this stuff, killing along the way, resurrecting them, and adding them to your ranks. And then you don't have to worry about the twins. You can just, break through the Neck, break through this natural choke point here, and boom, you are golden. Look at this. Look at all these cities. Look at all these towns in this area here. I mean, look, I would personally, the Vale of Arryn might be a bit difficult for him to go through. Let me just clear all this stuff out here. Vale of Arryn might be difficult because it's very mountainous there, a lot of choke points, and just, even for an army of, the dead, which don't have to sleep, don't have to eat, don't have a morale issue, it still might be a bit of a pain in the neck. Mountains are still, mountains. But the Riverlands of the War of the Five Kings, they suffered the worst. They really took an absolute pounding. So these guys, their defenses are down. They're basically burnt out. And so that's easy pickings right there. And then you just need to, go strike straight down from there. And boom, you are in the Reach, the most densely populated part of all of the... it's basically the breadbasket of Westeros. It's the most densely populated part. That's where most of the food is grown. There are millions of people here. And you just keep adding on and adding on and adding on. And you can just keep adding to that. You can go into the Westlands from there. You can... conquer all these people, and then you can go into the Crownlands, the Stormlands, and basically all you can do is just keep adding to your numbers and adding to your numbers, bypassing major clear that again, bypassing major centers of defense. Like, you don't have to actually go after Highgarden, you don't have to go after River Run, you don't have to go after Lannisport, you don't have to go over King's Landing. That would be a climactic final battle place anyway, just from a dramatic perspective. But basically just like go after the small folk, and you can have literally an army in the tens of millions. Just destroy them, add them to your, destroy these cities, destroy these small towns and villages, add them to your army, and what can anybody do about it? If they leave, if the guys up here in Winterfell, right, they decide to follow after you, you now are fighting them in an open field battle. You don't have to worry about their defenses at all. You can just show up and just swarm over them, and then again, when you kill them all off, you can add them to your ranks, and that'll just make things even that much easier when you go after the big target. So basically, just bypass the main centers of resistance. Winterfell, you can forget about Riverrun, the Twins, the Eyrie. Well, the Vale of Arryn, I think, is going to be a pain in the neck for them, but eventually, it will, it will fall eventually. Forget about Lannisport, Dorne. Can you imagine the deserts of Dorne being completely frozen? That would be freaking awesome. But basically, just bypass all the major settlements, go after the small little underdefended villages, and there's no way they can fit. There are yes, there are small castles and holdfasts here and there, but they should fall pretty quickly and easily. And yeah, that's all you have to do. So the Night King should have done that. He should have just added to his army and added to his army.
Now, as far as I can tell, they are not on any particular sort of timetable. They can spend as much time as they want going around pillaging and basically gaining strength along the way. If the ultimate objective is to get after Bran, well, who cares? I mean, you're going to get after him anyway. First off, he's wheelchair bound. It's like, how fast can he really move? Yeah, they can strap him to a horse and all that stuff. But, again, it's, he's limited with his mobility there. And look, the White Walkers have been waiting for thousands upon thousands of years. They're patient. They have, they don't need to go directly after the jugular of Bran. They can, take their time and just, pick people apart. And then when it finally comes time for that final confrontation, instead of having an army of, hundreds of thousands, they can have millions, if not possibly even tens of millions added to their army. Just skip right over the fixed defenses and, don't go straight for the jugular. This is a situation where the best course of action is, in fact, a long, slow, steady grind. Ultimately, attrition is working in your favor and time is on your side. Now, it is possible that they had to go after Bran because Bran was, say, working on a countermeasure of some kind, some sort of a spell or something, and that would be a way for them to, for the protagonists to defeat the Night King. Yes, that is a possibility, and that would give him some imperative for going after Bran directly and not doing the strategy that I laid out. But I don't remember that actually being mentioned anywhere. It's like it doesn't seem to be, talked about. Like, look, we're going to be doing this thing, and it's going to be ready in a month, and a month from now we're going to wipe out the Night King. I don't remember, something like that. I don't remember that actually happening. But correct me if I'm wrong here. Like I said, I didn't watch the last couple seasons. But I have been, watching people have been talking about it, and I haven't heard anything about there being, a timetable or, they need to complete something or, there's no real imperative for the Night King to go after Bran directly, at least not initially. He had the time to just, to basically do everything I just laid out. So, yeah, I think that just comes down to ultimately bad writing on the part of the show writers, who are now going to be doing Star Wars-related stuff, too. Yeah, basically, ever since they stopped following George Martin's books, they kind of went downhill from there, and, I'm not going to get to that. There have been plenty of other people who have spoken greatly about them, but, yeah, I'm just not going to go any further. Just suffice to say, this is just, the crowning achievement of, bad writing upon several seasons of bad writing. Whatever, that's pretty much it. Any case, so yeah, just my thoughts here. Something real quick and easy I figured I'd share with all of you guys. Any case, please hit the like and subscribe button. More videos coming out whenever I get around to it. And have a good day. Or don't have a good day. Your adults, have any kind of day you want. See you later. Winter is here, and it's already over.